A brutal storm tore across the plains as Jacob rode hard toward his cabin, his coat soaked, his horse trembling. Through the curtain of rain, he spotted a small figure collapsed near the road. He dismounted, heart pounding, and found a boy no older than 10, shivering, his thin arms wrapped around an elderly woman barely conscious. "Please, sir," the boy whispered, "she can't walk anymore." Jacob didn't hesitate. He lifted the woman onto his horse, steadied the boy, and led them to his cabin. Inside, he built a fire, wrapped them in blankets, and brewed what little coffee he had left. The grandmother's eyes fluttered open. "You're kind," she said weakly. Jacob shrugged. "Just doing what anyone should." The boy devoured the bread Jacob offered, his eyes shining with gratitude. They told him their wagon had broken down miles away, thieves had taken their supplies, and they'd been walking for hours. Jacob listened, jaw tight. He knew these lands were cruel to the weak. "You'll stay here till the storm passes," he said firmly. The boy smiled for the first time. "Thank you, mister." Jacob stared into the fire, unaware that fate had just walked into his lonely life wearing rags and exhaustion. Morning light spilled through the cabin windows. Jacob cooked eggs while the boy watched every move, fascinated. "What's your name?" Jacob asked. "Eli," the boy replied. "And that's my grandma, Margaret." Margaret sat quietly, her posture dignified despite her torn shawl. She thanked Jacob again, her voice calm and measured. As they ate, Jacob noticed something odd. Margaret spoke like a schoolteacher, her manners refined. Her hands were rough but her posture carried authority. "Where you folks headed?" Jacob asked. "West," she replied, "looking for a place to settle." Jacob nodded, though he sensed she wasn't telling everything. Later, he stepped outside to fix a loose board when he noticed a group of riders cresting the hill. They wore expensive coats, rifles gleaming. Jacob tensed, hand near his belt. The riders stopped at his fence. Their leader called out, "We're searching for a woman and a boy." Jacob's heart raced. "Can't help you," he said coldly. The man studied him. "Their family," he said carefully. "Important family." Jacob's eyes narrowed. "Everyone's important," he replied. The riders exchanged glances, then turned away. Jacob exhaled slowly. Inside, Eli hugged his grandmother. "They almost found us," he whispered. Margaret closed her eyes, fear flickering beneath her calm. Jacob had no idea what he'd just turned away. That night, Margaret finally spoke the truth. "Jacob," she said softly, "those men weren't strangers. They work for us." Jacob froze. "For you," she nodded. "My husband owned half the territory before he passed. Land, cattle, rail contracts. Our family is powerful, but power attracts wolves." Eli looked down. "Some people want our land," he whispered. Margaret continued, "They tried to force us to sign it away. We ran." Jacob leaned back, stunned. "You mean you're rich?" Margaret gave a sad smile. "Wealth doesn't stop fear." Jacob laughed bitterly. "You could buy this whole valley. And yet you sheltered us like beggars," she said. "That tells me more about you than gold ever could." Silence filled the cabin. Jacob thought of his empty days, his loneliness, his belief that kindness never mattered. "So what now?" he asked. Margaret met his eyes. "Now we stop running." She revealed a plan to expose the men trying to steal their land. Jacob felt fire rise in his chest. "You got my help," he said firmly. "No one threatens a kid under my roof." Eli smiled wide. For the first time, hope felt real. At dawn, they rode together toward town. The men who chased them waited near the courthouse, confident. Jacob stepped forward, hand steady on his gun. "Looking for someone," he called. Margaret dismounted and removed her worn shawl, revealing a fine dress beneath. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "Gentlemen," she said coldly, "you thought you could scare an old woman. You forgot who owns this land." Papers were produced, witnesses stepped forward. The corrupt men panicked as townsfolk turned against them. Jacob stood firm beside Margaret, eyes blazing. "You're done," he warned. Within minutes, the sheriff placed them in cuffs. Eli cheered. Margaret squeezed Jacob's hand. "You changed our fate," she said softly. Jacob shook his head. "No, you changed mine." Weeks later, Margaret rebuilt her estate and offered Jacob a place to stay. "You don't have to be alone anymore," she said. Jacob looked at Eli, now laughing in the yard. "Guess I won't be," he replied. The lonely cowboy finally found a family, and it all began with one storm, one fire, and one act of kindness.